Hey guys, Paul here. Welcome back to APS Amplifier, where we talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! And today I've got a lot of talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! Because these are 5 Yu-Gi-Oh! Hills that I would die on. These are beliefs that I've got about the game, and I want to hear what other people think about them, maybe try to convince me that I'm wrong, or right, or share your own, or whatever. Anyway, I won't waste any more time. The first one is, I think that pendulums get a lot of unnecessary flack that truly belongs to link monsters. So what I mean by this is, many people cite pendulums as the sort of downfall of Yu-Gi-Oh! This is an opinion that you'll oftentimes hear in very casual circles. People are oftentimes resistant to new summoning mechanics making their way into the game, and obviously pendulums were a bit strong for a lot of people's taste. By strong, I don't mean necessarily they were really good, but like literally, they did a lot really fast. The half monster, half spell thing, the scales, the new zones that came with them, and sort of the weird rulings and stuff, right? Like it goes to the extra deck and this and that. And for a lot of people, that was actually when they quit. Sometimes people just will meet me at conventions and stuff, and they'll tell me, yeah, like pendulums were, that was just, the straw that broke the camel's back. They did too much. This is why I quit Yu-Gi-Oh! It's ruined. The thing is, though, pendulums today are in a really not great spot. They're barely playable. In the TCG specifically, they haven't even unbanned Electromite. They kept their whole thing where they're attached to Link Monster zones after Master Rule 4's revision, which is still really strange to me. And they just already have natural weaknesses like being really susceptible to removal cards, like spell trap removal on their scales, needing to have 2 scales to begin with, all sorts of things, right? Link monsters, though, I think are the real sort of kicker of what pushed modern Yu-Gi-Oh's speed and consistency and combos to the next level. There's a lot of things you can point to, Link 1's being chief among them. I think that the Link 1 card design is kind of inherently just meant to be something that's exploited and really broken and really powerful. These Link 1 monsters that can search a field spell and stuff are obviously really good. But even just things like Salamander and Almirage can lead to entire Cyberse combos, and it's really insane. But also, Link monsters have very low, weak requirements, and things like, 2 effect monsters, or 2 monsters with a different name, or 2 non-token monsters, just basically not recipes at all. I feel like Link monsters really don't have very much flavor to them in that regard, because whereas with something like Synchros, I'm taking a tuner and a non-tuner and adding up levels, or Xyz, there's some lore to what's actually going on and what materials actually are underneath an Xyz monster, and obviously fusion is really self-explanatory and rituals and stuff like that. But with Link monsters, you're just kind of sending 2 monsters away, just 2 arbitrary monsters. So I think from a flavor standpoint, not a big fan of that. But anyway, to get back to the main point, I think that a lot of people quit when pendulums came out because they thought it was too much for them. But the truth is, links are kind of what has made Yu-Gi-Oh! So fast today, and so in many cases overwhelming to play and uninviting. Now, it's not to say that, pendulum monsters did themselves any favors. They were complicated feeling at the start, but I do think that they get a lot of flack where link monsters really probably deserve more of it. Okay, next one is, I think that reprints are objectively good in all cases. So this one might seem kind of obvious and self-explanatory, and I'd like to think that it should be. People deserve to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. We play this game because we want to get the cards and play them. And so I'm a strong proponent of cards being easy to get for everybody. I don't think that cards should be there should be no card that costs $100 that is just a standard playable card. It's different obviously for a prize card or some sort of weird promo, but I'm talking about just if I want to be able to play SP Little Knight, I want to be able to play Pot of Prosperity, I want to be able to play, Sky Striker, Mobilize, Engage. These are all historically $100 cards. Today that might be a Dominus card or a Fiendsmith Engine type of card or whatever. I hate when cards like that are hard to get for people. I think that you should always reprint these cards expeditiously, liberally, make it easy for people to get the cards. The reason why this is sort of a hot take, I guess you could say, is because some people don't like reprints because they feel that they decrease, it's true, they decrease the value of their existing investment in the card. So I bought Fiendsmith Engravers last year when they were $100, and then Konami went and reprinted it in its latest pack, and that's not fair to me. I lost my investment, and I don't trust Yu-Gi-Oh! Anymore, or something like that, for this reason or that. Yeah, I don't really think, I just don't have any sympathy for that. I don't think that these are cards that are meant to be investments in any way. I mean, the closest thing I can say in that regard is when you spend a lot of money on a card when it's just printed, I guess your investment is being able to use it in regionals for for a few months, like kind of unrestrained, right? But there's this tacit understanding that any card in Yu-Gi-Oh is going to eventually just probably find its way either power crept or on the ban list. But like, I don't know. I don't really think that you get to complain when a reprint makes a card like just more available for people. Like, I don't really understand that. Like, don't get me wrong. Again, I think that like the idea of doing some weird, cool alt art cards that are maybe exclusive to like winning a YCS or a prize, or maybe you went to some Yu-Gi-Oh Comic-Con event and you got like an alt art thing. That sort of thing is great. But like, still, if it's an alt art Ash Blossom, cool. I just think that people should have access to Ash Blossom. And that applies to every card in the game. I just think that reprints are a good thing and need to happen more. And really, they wouldn't even be that big of a deal if Konami would just do mixed rarities in like main sets to begin with. So that way you wouldn't have to worry about this whole like only the rich players can afford Dominus cards and Mulch Armies. Well, it could just be like everybody can afford them, and maybe like the rich players can just have the super shiny special one, but they're all functionally identical. That's just my opinion anyway. Okay, next one is I genuinely believe that Yu-Gi-Oh does not actually have enough time to be properly played most of the time. And here's what I mean by that. So in Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments, currently rounds are 45 minutes. If you can believe it, before COVID, they were actually like 40-minute rounds. And in almost all cases I see at locals and stuff, games just don't really end in a comfortable amount of time. People have gripes about the end of match procedures, and I certainly share some of those concerns. But what I really think is an issue with Yu-Gi-Oh is just that like turns take a really long time, and if you aren't perfectly aware of what your opponent's cards do, it's actually unrealistic to even expect to be able to properly read and synthesize what your opponent's cards are doing. And I see this happen a lot at locals. People will just kind of just trust that their opponent's not cheating them because they know that to pick up and read every card is kind of a fruitless effort. It's just difficult to do. Cards are really long and like just wordy and stuff. And like, if you're reading, you're probably losing anyway. And that really sucks to say, but what I mean is, why is this person outside? I hate people who grab their engines. Anyway, yeah, so, what I mean by that is like, I think if you know going into a tournament what you're expected to face, like how Fiendsmiths work, and how Mitsurugi works, Ryzeal, Malice, common threats, that's important to know when you're prepping for a tournament. But I'm saying that for the average player, you can't really expect to just like play Yu-Gi-Oh and read cards and like know what they do in a match. There's just not enough time for it. So yeah, that's something that I'm not sure that there's like necessarily a solution to. I mean, they can't really start making shorter card text because they've had years to do that and they haven't. Maybe that round time should be a little bit higher. But yeah, I guess I just hate when I see people kind of getting called for like slow play when they are literally reading cards. But like that's kind of the way it is. And if you want like a sort of icing on top of this, remember that you are actually supposed to, according to the rules, shuffle your deck every time you like pick it up to search a card or summon something from the deck. But it says a lot that in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, we don't ever really do that because we know that turns are going to have so much searching that to offer your opponent the deck to cut after every search would be like stalling and slow playing, even though it's in the rule book. But like that's kind of where we are. So yeah. Okay, next one is I think that the Banished Zone should never have become a resource. That's not like a terribly hot take. I've heard lots of people say this, but I just think it's the truth. I have no problem with the graveyard being a sort of second hand. I knew that Yu-Gi-Oh would probably always end up that way. Lots of decks can do a lot of things out of the graveyard. You've seen, some tier pile on Master Duel or some engine slot deck that does a bunch from the grave. Fine, whatever. I think though that when you have decks that literally just utilize the Banished Zone as if it's just another graveyard, it's sort of weird to me. Like I think those should have always been separate. If you go back in time to what the Banished Zone was originally called, or the banishment was originally called, it was just like removed from game. The implication was that if a card was removed from the game, it was out of the game. It was not going to be used. It meant that like it's not just in the graveyard where you can use Monster Reborn or Call the Haunted on it. It's like it's out, and then we got archetypes that are kind of based on like banishing cards, or that's when they call it removed from play, and then like now there's just stuff that fuses from the Banished Zone, easily recovers banished cards. So I suppose the silver lining here is that Konami has now added banished face down to a lot of cards, which is effectively taking the place of what I'd say banishment was supposed to be. So banished face down cards are extremely difficult to interact with, and like they're pretty much out of the game, although there's even still ways to use those. But I think that that's like good. It just sucks that it had to really get that way. So yeah, that's a small one, but just a thing. And then the final one is, I think that conceding is kind of not very good to do. My hot take, maybe my more like harsh way of putting it is, I think that conceding is kind of like for losers. And what I mean by that is, it's not that like there's never a time when you should concede a game or give up when it's hopeless. I'm saying that if you're trying to learn about a matchup, learn about an opposing deck, learn more about your deck, then you should take opportunities when the stakes aren't high, like when you're playtesting against your friends or maybe just playing at locals or things like that, to not just stare down a field that looks unbeatable and give up and pick up your cards, but try to play through it. The reason I say this is because I do this a lot, especially like on Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, which is kind of just the king of unbreakable boards and 10-minute long turns. I know it's annoying. I know it sucks. Not everybody even has the time to necessarily do it. But if you're trying to get a little bit better with your deck, or you're trying to, just learn more about the game, I think that there's a real value in trying to play your way through boards that look unbeatable, because remember, your opponent still is the person that has to beat you. So even if they have a bunch of negates and things and interruptions, they are still the person who has to use those things. And you would be pleasantly surprised how many people know how to rehearse a combo and kind of like regurgitate it, but they don't actually know anything about what cards they should be negating with their Fiendsmith's Desiree, or with whatever kind of cards that interrupt you and stuff. So they might let you get away with using this card that you actually need, or this card that you actually need, or they just won't they won't interact with you properly. And so I always kind of put the onus on my opponents to beat me in those scenarios, and I will play all the cards that I can until I literally have nothing left. Then I will concede. I think it's good practice, and I think that it's something that you can like pick up on little neat situations and find out about like interactions that you might not have gotten the chance to see. So try not to just let despair kick in. And I'll also add one last thing to that too, because this is something that I see on Master Duel a lot in particular, although it sort of happens in the TCG, but Master Duel's got Max C, so it's more pronounced. Some people will quit the moment that they see Max C get played, and I understand that this card is annoying as hell. I don't love Max C or anything, but I think that it's important to maybe learn what can your deck do under Max C. Similarly, what can your deck do under Dimension Shifter, or what can it do under Droll Lockbird, or Artifact Lancia even. Basically, finding out what are your deck's limits under the constraints of those cards. Is there a way that you can possibly just OTK your opponent through a Max C when you're going second? Because that actually happens a lot. And are there things that you can like set up and put in place underneath the Dimension Shifter? Because once those turns of banishment are over, your opponent is down a card, and like you might actually still be able to pull that game back. And we've seen what a lot of modern combo decks can still make underneath Droll Lockbird. So just try not to like give into despair and just be like, oh, this card just beats my deck and they played it and there's no hope and I give up. Try to sort of fight through. I know this is a tough one, and I know that sometimes people get a little angry when I say that. They're like, what, Paul? Like, I'm not going to waste my time with this 10-minute turn. I'm just going to give up and like go to the next game. I'm not saying you can't do it, and I understand why you would do it, but I think that if it's not like a tournament where, there's obviously the time constraints that I was talking about earlier, where there's like times when you can just recognize you can't do anything and scoop, fine, I get it. Those are situations. But still, if you're just like practicing, it's sometimes good to learn that stuff so that way you can make informed decisions in the tournament about whether or not you could actually play around this board, or if you should, you know that you can't and you can like give up and stuff. So yeah, those are 5 Yu-Gi-Oh! Hills that I would personally die on, but I am certainly somebody who can be persuaded. So if you want to chat about it down below in the comments, I'd love to hear it. And yeah, I'd love to hear also what you guys' sort of, Yu-Gi-Oh! Hills or swords you would die on are. It's going to be it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Pass turn.